I just briefly wanted to talk about this book here, American English, and it's written by Walt Wolfram, and if you haven't heard of him, shame on you. He's a very, very famous and popular linguist who specializes in sociolinguistics. So, I have this idea brewing that in the future I want to make a video series on sociolinguistics on different English dialects and the ways that people perceive different English dialects and how that has to do with oppression and power and those types of things. Why is there a standard version of the language, but besides the obvious reason of people communicating with each other, which type of dialect has prestige, which type of dialect doesn't have prestige. And I think it's just fun to know about all the different English dialects out there, especially for people who they're watching my videos to learn English, or they're English language learners. English is their second language. I think even to them probably more so, even more so than native speakers like myself, they're going to find these different dialects interesting. And see, on television, with the Hollywood movies and the media and all that stuff, most people, they're speaking standard American English, and that's right, there is a standard American English. Standard American English is based off Midwestern English, which is my native language. Minnesotan English can kind of, has its own little flavor there, as you've probably noticed just by listening to my videos. But when you start getting more to southern Minnesota and more to Iowa and those types of places, and more a little bit southern Wisconsin, South Dakota, and those kind of places, in the Twin Cities, which is where I was living before, and I used to live in southern Minnesota before, so if you'll notice in my older videos, my accent is different than it is now, because I now live in central Minnesota, so I developed a central Minnesotan accent, which is different. So if you go back to my older videos, notice that the way I talk, especially with my vowels, I pronounce them different now, and I didn't even notice this happened. It was all subconscious. So yeah, there's many dialects out there of English that are not portrayed in the media at all. Or if they are portrayed in the media, it's like for some sort of comic relief. It's heavily exaggerated, or it's just not a very realistic presentation of that dialect. And one example is the movie and the TV show Fargo. Now, the movie and TV show Fargo is supposed to show us what Minnesotan English sounds like. And they do a pretty good job about figuring out what part of the Minnesotan dialect is different than other dialects in English. But the problem with the movie and the TV show is they overemphasize it way too much. It's a little bit too strong. It's not, we don't speak like that so much. But, we do talk like that, and we do use those things sometimes. But I wouldn't say it's quite as often or quite as strong as they portray it. So I think it'll be fun, because there's a lot of dialects that most people have never even heard of. They've never really been portrayed in the media, or if they have, it's very, very, very rarely do you ever see it in the media. Like, we'll talk about Cajun English, maybe we'll talk about Appalachian English, we'll talk about Californian English maybe a little bit, talk about Midwestern English, talk about East Coastern English. In the East Coast there's more dialects because English has been in the East Coast longer. So you have like a Boston accent that's distinct from a New York accent, which is distinct from a New Jersey accent, which is distinct from a Maine accent or a Vermont accent, etc., etc. We'll also talk about some of the southern accents, like Texan accent, maybe what they speak in Alabama or Georgia. Some of the different pronunciations, and in the English language, pronunciations usually differ most in vowels, but there's also a lot of different vocabulary that are used by these different dialects out there. So I definitely think this will be a very fun project in the future, and I hope you guys stay tuned and wait. You know, it might be a while before I actually get to making them, but I think it'll be really, really interesting. I also want to talk about African American English. I also want to talk about different dialects of British English and Irish English that are out there. Because some of those, even I think, are very interesting, especially as an American. Some of them sound quite foreign to me. For instance, Glaswegian English, I can't understand really at all. Maybe I can pick out some words here and there, but a lot of it I have a very tough time understanding. And Northern Scottish, kind of, you almost have to have a translator to speak English. So, especially the elderly people, both here in America and in the UK, they preserve the dialects a lot better, because with the mass media nowadays and the internet and all those types of things, you're starting to see a lot of dialects die out, unfortunately. Unfortunately for linguists, us linguophiles out there. But with the older generation, you'll still see a lot more of that dialect coming out. They're using a lot older terms, older lexicon, older even phrases. So yeah, I think this will be a very cool project, so stay tuned.